I was going to jump. No one knew it. No one cared. At least that's what I thought. It was a cold Monday morning. Gray clouds pressed down on the city like the sky was sick of looking at me. I walked the same route I always did down 5th Street, past the laundromat, the corner store, the tiny park that nobody ever went to. Except one man. He was always there. Same spot. Same bench. Same worn-out navy coat. Always feeding pigeons with this calm look in his eyes. Like the world didn't touch him anymore. I never talked to him. Never even said hi. But that day, he looked up at me. Straight into me. "Cold day, huh?" he said, smiling like we'd known each other for years. I froze. My first instinct was to walk on, ignore him. But something about his voice stopped me. It wasn't just kindness, it was presence. Like he saw me. Like he somehow knew what I was about to do. "Yeah," I muttered, not sure why I answered. He patted the space beside him on the bench. "Got time for a story?" I should have said no. I had a plan. Terrible, final, irreversible plan. But my legs moved on their own. I sat down. And that's how it started. That old man, Thomas, changed everything. He didn't ask me questions. Didn't probe. He just started talking. About life. About regrets. About love. About things he'd done and things he wished he hadn't. I didn't realize it then. But he was saving me. One sentence at a time. He told me about a woman named Margaret. His Margaret. She was the kind of person who made the world quieter when she walked in, he said, eyes soft with memory. Not because she was shy, but because you just wanted to listen when she spoke. They met in 1972. Brooklyn. A bookstore with a leaking roof and dust on every shelf. She was looking for a book on stars. I was pretending to read poetry. He chuckled. I asked if she needed help finding constellations. She laughed and said, "Only if you promise not to get me lost in them." His hand trembled as he fed a crumb to a pigeon. I watched the bird flutter its wings and settle. I married her 3 years later. His voice cracked. Just slightly. Barely enough to notice. We didn't have much. But we had each other. And we had Sundays. Always Sundays. Pancakes in the morning. Vinyl records all day. And we take turns choosing one sad song to cry to before dinner. He looked out over the empty playground in the park. Not a single kid in sight. Just dead leaves and that heavy, gray sky. "She died 10 years ago," he said quietly. "Breast cancer. Came fast. It came cruel." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "I stopped talking to people after that," he went on. "Stopped doing just about everything. Until I realized something." He turned to me. His eyes were sharp. Alive. I wasn't dead yet. That hit me, like a punch to the chest. I still had stories, he said. Still had breath. And someone out there, maybe needed both. He paused. "I don't know why I said hi to you today. Just a feeling. But you looked like you were carrying something too heavy for one person." I couldn't answer. My throat was tight. He didn't push. Instead, he smiled. "Want to come back tomorrow?" he asked. I didn't trust myself to speak. But I nodded. And that's how it began. The second chance I didn't know I needed. I came back the next day. And the next. And the next. Every morning, 8 a.m., same bench, same birds. And Thomas, waiting like clockwork with a half-empty bag of breadcrumbs and a heart full of stories. First, I just listened. He talked about little things. The sound of a kettle in winter. The first time he drove a car. How he once tried to learn the saxophone but quit after a week because it sounded like a dying goose. He had this way of telling a story that made you feel like you were there. Like you could smell the toast burning in his first apartment. Like you could feel the wind whipping through his coat the night he proposed to Margaret on the Brooklyn Bridge. I started laughing again. Real laughter. The kind I hadn't heard from myself in months. Maybe longer. He noticed. Of course he did. "You've got a good laugh," he said once. "Kind of crooked. Like you're not used to it yet." I shrugged. "Guess I'm not." He gave me this knowing look. The kind only old people can give. Like they're holding some secret you haven't earned yet. "You will be." One morning I brought coffee. Felt weird. but right. I didn't know how he liked it, so I just guessed. Black with 1 sugar. He took a sip and smiled. Perfect. It wasn't, probably. But he said it like it was. We sat in silence for a while that day, just watching the pigeons squabble and puff their feathers. I remember thinking, this is peace. This is what peace feels like. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just still. And then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you want to tell me what brought you to that bench the first time?" I froze. My hands went cold. My heart thudded like it wanted to escape my chest. He didn't press. Just sipped his coffee, eyes forward, letting me decide. And for the first time in a long time, I did. I was going to jump. The words came out like gravel. Dry. Heavy. Scraping something raw on the way up. Thomas didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly, as if he already knew. I wasn't even scared, I said. That's the part that still messes with me. I was numb. Just done. The words tumbled after that, like someone had cracked open a dam I didn't even know was there. I told him about the job I lost, 6 years of effort gone in a 10-minute meeting with a smug guy in a gray suit. I told him about the relationship that shattered me, the man who said I was too much and not enough in the same breath. I told him about the phone that stopped ringing, the inbox that stayed empty, the slow drip of silence that became a flood. And I told him about the night before we met, the bottle of wine, the sleeping pills lined up like little white promises, the final text I typed out but never sent. "I'm sorry. I just don't see the point anymore." He didn't interrupt. Didn't look away. He just listened. Really listened. Like my pain mattered. Like it was sacred. When I finally ran out of words, there was this long, aching pause. And then he said something I'll never forget. "You know what the hardest thing is about being at the edge?" I looked at him, exhausted. "What?" "Not jumping. Staying. Choosing to stay even when everything hurts. That's the kind of courage nobody ever writes poems about." He leaned back on the bench, staring up at the sky like he was daring it to crack open. "Anyone can fall," he said. "But staying takes a damn warrior." And then, quieter. "You're still here. That makes you dangerous. That makes you powerful." I wanted to cry. But for once, the tears didn't come from pain. They came from relief. From finally being seen. From finally not being invisible anymore. And from that moment on, I came back every single day, not because I needed saving, but because, somehow, we were saving each other. The city didn't get any softer, but I did. Something inside me began to thaw, like frost giving way to spring. I started to notice things again, the smell of roasted peanuts from the corner cart, the jazz pouring out of a second-story window, the way sunlight hit the park bench at exactly 9:17 a.m. Thomas noticed too. "You've got more color in your face," he said one morning, biting into a croissant I brought him. "Less ghost, more human." I rolled my eyes. "Thanks, I think." He laughed. "It's a compliment, kid. You were fading when I met you. Now you're starting to shine." That word stuck with me. Shine. I hadn't thought of myself as someone who could shine in years. But something had shifted. I started waking up with purpose. Brushing my hair again. Answering texts. I even reached out to my sister, the one I hadn't spoken to since our brutal Thanksgiving blow-up 2 years ago. We talked. We cried. We made plans. It wasn't perfect, but it was possible. And that was enough. One rainy Tuesday, Thomas brought a photo. It was old, curled at the edges, the color fading into warm sepia. In it, he stood beside Margaret, arms wrapped around each other like vines. She was everything, he whispered, tracing the edge of the picture with a crooked finger. Kind of woman who could make you feel forgiven just by looking at you. I looked at the way he looked at her. I didn't even know love like that existed outside of books. "You ever think about dating again?" I asked softly. He chuckled, but it was hollow. "No. That chapter's closed. Some hearts only beat for one person." I nodded. I understood. But I also wondered, was he really okay with being alone? He folded the photo back into his coat pocket, looked me square in the eye. "You thinking of falling in love again?" I blinked. I wasn't even thinking of falling asleep tomorrow, a month ago. His face lit up. "There it is," he said. "That shine." We sat there in the rain, soaked, cold, but somehow warmer than I'd felt in years. Neither of us said it out loud. But we both knew. The bench had become sacred. A sanctuary. A second chance made of wood and stories and shared silence. Then, one day, he didn't show up. I got to the bench at 8 o'clock, like always. Waited. Drank my coffee. Fed the birds. Watched the clouds roll by like lazy ghosts. By 9 o'clock, my heart was pounding. By 10 o'clock, I was pacing the path like a stray dog looking for its person. Thomas never missed a morning. Not once in 2 months. Not even when it snowed. I told myself maybe he slept in. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he finally took a trip or just needed space. But deep down I knew. Something was wrong. The next day I brought him a muffin. He still didn't come. Day 3 I asked the old man at the hot dog stand if he'd seen him. He shook his head. The bird guy? Nah. In a few days. I felt something collapse inside me. That bench suddenly looked like a gravestone. I couldn't breathe. I walked home in a daze. My apartment, once a tomb, now felt even emptier because now it was empty and echoing with the ghost of someone who had made it worth leaving in the first place. I sat on my couch and stared at the floor for hours. The quiet was so loud it made my teeth hurt. By day 4 I cracked. I did something I wasn't sure I should have done. I followed the address on the tag of an old scarf he'd once left behind by accident. He didn't know I saw it. Didn't know I tucked it in my bag intending to return it the next morning. Now it was my only clue. The building was a small, crumbling complex on the east side. Paint peeling. Windows foggy with dust. A place time had clearly forgotten. I knocked on his door with trembling hands. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. I was about to turn away when a frail voice behind me said, "You looking for Thomas?" I spun around. An old woman in slippers and a pink bathrobe stood there, squinting through thick glasses. "Yes," I said. "He hasn't been at the park. I'm a friend." Her face softened. She didn't speak for a second. Then she said the words I'd been dreading. "He was taken to the hospital 3 days ago. Collapsed in the hallway. I think it was his heart." The world tilted. I grabbed the railing just to stay upright. "Which hospital?" I asked, barely above a whisper. She told me. And I ran. I ran like I was chasing my only lifeline through a storm. The hospital smelled like bleach and sorrow. I burst through the doors, breathless, heart racing like a war drum. My palms were slick with sweat. My throat burned from the cold air outside and the fire inside me. At the front desk, I blurted out, Thomas Elridge. Brought in 3 days ago. Please, just tell me he's okay." The nurse blinked at me, then typed something into her computer. Click. Click. Pause. Room 408. 4th floor. Critical but stable. I nearly collapsed from the flood of relief. My knees actually buckled, but I caught myself. Took the elevator because my legs wouldn't have survived the stairs. When I reached the room, I froze in the doorway. Thomas looked so small in that hospital bed. Tubes in his arms. Oxygen mask over his face. Machines beeped and hummed in a quiet, cruel rhythm. It didn't feel fair. He was larger than life on that bench. Out here? He looked like a tired man just waiting for permission to let go. But I wasn't going to let him. I stepped inside, sat down next to him, and whispered, "Hey, old man. I brought you coffee. Don't make me drink it alone." His eyes flickered. Then slowly they opened. And he smiled. Weak, crooked, but real. "You found me," he rasped. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I nodded. "Of course I did. You think you can just disappear on me after all that therapy by bench?" He laughed, a dry, broken sound that still somehow held music. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said. "You scared the hell out of me." He reached for my hand. His grip was soft, but it still held weight. "Wasn't sure anyone would notice," he whispered. My heart shattered. "I noticed. I care," I said. "You matter to me, Thomas. You saved my life. I don't care if you're 80 or 100 or half dead. I'm not letting you go that easy." He closed his eyes, squeezing my hand. "You sound like her. Margaret." He nodded. "She'd yell at me too. But then she'd kiss my forehead and tell me I wasn't allowed to die without permission." I laughed through my tears. "Well, consider this an official denial of your death request. You're staying. Understood?" He smiled. "Understood." And just like that, we were back. Still together. Still fighting. Still alive. Thomas stayed in the hospital for 6 more days. I was there for every single one of them. Sometimes he talked. Sometimes he just stared out the window, watching the birds that gathered on the ledge like they were waiting for him. Other times we just sat in silence, holding hands like survivors of the same invisible war. The nurses started calling me his granddaughter. We never corrected them. There was something beautiful about it. That someone thought we were family. And honestly, by then, we were. I brought him soup from the diner down the street. Read him pages from the book he said Margaret used to love. Brushed his thinning hair with gentle fingers when he was too tired to do it himself. And one night, just before visiting hours ended, he said something I didn't expect. "You know, I had a son." I turned to him, surprised. "You never mentioned him." He gave a long sigh. "Not much to say. We haven't spoken in almost 15 years. His name's David. He lives in Ohio, I think." What happened? Thomas looked away. His face tightened. Regret sat heavy on his chest. We fought after Margaret passed. I pushed him away. Thought I was protecting him from my grief. But really, I was punishing myself. I sat with that for a moment. Do you want to talk to him? Thomas didn't answer right away. Just stared at the ford dripping rhythmically into his arm. I wouldn't even know what to say. I squeezed his hand. Then let him talk. You just listen. The next morning I searched. Took me an hour to track David down. An old work profile, a landline number that still worked. I dialed it with shaking fingers. A woman picked up. His wife. I explained. My voice was careful, my tone calm. I told her who I was, who Thomas was to me. How he was in the hospital. How he missed his son. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'll tell him. That afternoon, just before sunset, David walked into the hospital room. He was taller than I imagined. Wore a suit like he'd come straight from work. His face looked like Thomas's, only sharper, angrier, guarded. Thomas looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. David? His son didn't say anything for a second. Then his voice cracked. Hey, Dad. Just like that. The years between them dissolved. And the healing began. They talked for 3 hours. I stayed in the hallway most of the time, letting them have their space. I couldn't hear everything, but every once in a while, a voice would rise, sharp, wounded. Then soften again. And once, I heard them both laugh. That sound made my chest ache in the best way. When I finally stepped back into the room, David stood up. He looked at me, this stranger who'd somehow become his father's lifeline, and held out his hand. Thank you, he said. For not letting him be alone. I shook his hand. He didn't let me be alone either, I replied. We kinda saved each other. David nodded, eyes glistening. He does that, he said quietly. After he left, Thomas looked over at me. There was something different in his face. Lighter. Like a boulder had been lifted off his chest. Think I can finally breathe, he said. Didn't even realize I'd been holding it in all these years? I smiled. Proud of you, old man. He smirked. Don't make me cry, I'm too dehydrated. That night, when the nurse came in to check his vitals, Thomas winked at her. Can I go home tomorrow? He asked. She smiled. Doctor says if everything looks good in the morning, you're out of here. He turned to me, eyes shining. Looks like we're going back to the bench. I nodded. And for the first time since he collapsed, I believed it. He was coming back. We were coming back. To stories. To pigeons. To coffee cups and broken people holding each other together. The next morning, I came early with clean clothes and his favorite croissant. But his room was empty. Bed made. Machines gone. Silence like a punch in the gut. I ran to the nurse's station, heart slamming. Thomas Elridge, where's he? Room for 08. The nurse looked up, eyes soft. Too soft. He was discharged, she said. But not to home care. He asked to be moved to a hospice facility. Said it was time. My breath caught. He didn't tell me, I whispered. She handed me a note. Scrawled on the back of a diner napkin, it read. Didn't want goodbye tears? Come see me when you're ready. I'll be waiting and I'll still want coffee. Love, T. I stood there shaking. He was leaving. But he wasn't gone. Not yet. I waited 2 days before going to the hospice. Not because I didn't want to see him. Because I didn't know how. How do you walk into a room knowing it might be the last time? How do you look someone in the eye and say things that might be carved into memory forever? But Thomas had always been braver than me. He sat up when I walked in, wearing the ugliest hospital gown known to mankind and the brightest damn smile I'd ever seen on his face. Took you long enough, he teased. I held up 2 cups of coffee. You're lucky I came at all. You left me with napkin poetry and a whole lot of panic. He laughed, reaching for his cup. His hands were thinner. His eyes sunken. But the soul in them, still fiery, still him, hadn't dimmed a bit. We sat by the window. No pigeons, just sunshine. And that was enough. He asked about my sister. I told him we were talking again, slow and awkward, but real. He asked if I'd written anything lately. I confessed I started journaling again. He called it soul plumbing. And then, after a long silence, he said, I'm not scared. I looked at him. His voice was so calm it startled me. I was, he admitted. But not anymore. You know why? Why? Because I didn't waste it. My life. Even the parts one got wrong. I loved. I hurt. I lost. I found. And now, I get to go with peace in my chest and someone at my side who knows my story. Tears blurred my vision. I'm not ready, I whispered. He smiled. You don't have to be. Just be. One breath at a time. We talked for hours. Told every last story we hadn't told yet. Laughed about stupid things. Cried when we needed to. And then, as the sun dipped low and painted the room gold, he reached into the drawer beside him, pulled out a small, crumpled paper bag. Inside was a key. To my apartment, he said. I want you to have it. Thomas, no arguing. There's something waiting for you there. Something I want you to read. When the time comes. I held the key in my hand like it was made of glass. He didn't say goodbye. He just said, see you tomorrow? And I said, always. But the next morning, he was gone. The call came at 6:17 a.m. A nurse, gentle and rehearsed, told me Thomas had passed in his sleep. No pain. No struggle. Just quiet. Like the end of a song. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there on the edge of my bed holding the phone like it was still connected to him. Like if I didn't hang up, he'd still be there somehow. Eventually, I got up, dressed in silence, walked to the park. The bench was empty. Same as the sky. Same as my chest. I sat down in our spot, held the cup of coffee I'd bought him, and whispered, you better be feeding pigeons in heaven, you stubborn old man. The tears came then. Fast. Ugly. Loud. I didn't care who saw. Because grief doesn't wait for permission. It just crashes in. I stayed there for hours, like maybe if I sat long enough, he'd come strolling back up the path with that crooked smile and a dumb pun about how ghosts still need their caffeine. But he didn't. And he wouldn't. That evening, I went to his apartment. The key in my hand felt heavier than before. The place was small but warm. Books lined the shelves. Margaret's photo stood in a frame on the mantel. Their life was still everywhere, in the way the shoes by the door were neatly placed, in the jazz records stacked beside the player. I walked slowly, touching things gently, like I was afraid to wake the ghosts. On the kitchen table was an envelope. My name was on it. Inside, a letter. Kid, if you're reading this, then I finally left that damn hospital bed for good. I hope I didn't make too much of a mess on the way out. I wanted to tell you this in person, but I know you'd try to fix me with coffee and sarcasm, and I'd never get the words out. So here they are. Thank you. Thank you for giving an old man purpose again. For sitting with me, laughing with me, grieving with me. You made my last season feel like spring again. You saved me just as much as I saved you. More, probably. I watched you bloom right in front of me. Don't stop now. Right? Love. Cry. Laugh. Stay. This world needs your voice, your story, your heart. Go live, kid. And when it hurts, remember the bench. Remember the birds. Remember me. With love that doesn't die. I held that letter to my chest and cried. And for the first time, the grief didn't just feel like loss. It felt like legacy. I didn't leave his apartment for 2 days. I just stayed there, wrapped in the quiet he left behind. I slept on his couch, cooked oatmeal in his tiny kitchen, played his records, the ones Margaret loved. I read the notes he scribbled in the margins of old paperbacks. I sat in his chair and watched the pigeons gather outside his window like they knew. Maybe they did. On the third morning, I found a box, tucked in the back of his closet. It was labeled for after. Inside were dozens of letters. Some addressed. Some not. Letters to Margaret. To David. To people I didn't know. But one was for me. My name, again, in his careful, shaky handwriting. I opened it, hands trembling. Hey again, you stubborn, beautiful soul. If you're still here, then you haven't run off to the mountains to be a hermit like I once tried to do. Didn't work. Raccoons don't make great roommates. Listen, I meant what I said in the first letter. But this one's a little different. This one's your permission slip. To stop waiting. To stop surviving. To start living. You don't owe the world perfection. You don't owe anyone a timeline. But you do owe yourself the chance to write your next chapter, and not just write it, but live the hell out of it. So here's my challenge. Tomorrow, I want you to go back to the bench. Not to grieve. To begin. Talk to someone. Say hi to a stranger. Share your story. Pass it on. Because the bench is yours now. The world needs more listeners like you. More hearts like yours. Go be someone's Thomas. Love always. I read it over and over until the words blurred. And then I did what he asked. I went back to the park. I sat on the bench. And when a woman walked by, head down, eyes hollow, I smiled at her and said, "Cold day, huh?" She froze. Just like I had. Then nodded. "Yeah, it is." I patted the space beside me. "Got time for a story?" And just like that, it began again. Her name was Allison. Mid-30s. Tired eyes. A scarf pulled tight like armor around her throat. She hesitated before sitting down, just like I had. I didn't press her. Just offered my coffee and said, "It's not great, but it's warm." She took it. And after a long silence, she whispered, "I don't know why I sat down." I smiled. I didn't either. The first time. She glanced at me. "Is this something you do?" Sit here and talk to strangers. I looked out at the pigeons fluttering around the sidewalk. I didn't used to, but someone did it for me. Saved my life, actually. That got her attention. She turned her full body toward me. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. Just enough. Enough to open a little space in her armor. I told her about Thomas. About the coffee. The stories. The way he saw people when no one else did. And then I stopped talking. And I listened. She was quiet at first. But slowly her words started to flow. She talked about her divorce. About the miscarriage she hadn't told anyone about. About the way she couldn't bring herself to delete her mom's number from her phone even though she'd been gone for 2 years. She said, I don't even know why I'm telling you this. And I told her because your heart needed a witness. That's what Thomas used to say. By the time she left, she looked lighter. She hugged me before walking away. Didn't say goodbye. Just, thank you. I think I needed this more than I knew. I watched her disappear into the crowd. And I sat there, heart full, coffee cold. It was happening. The thing Thomas saw in me, the shine, it was real. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was purpose. And that night, when I got home to his apartment, my apartment now, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A notebook, tucked under a stack of jazz records. The first page said, "The bench diaries for every soul that sat beside me." It was empty, waiting, and I knew exactly what to do with it. I started writing. Every night. After every conversation, every shared moment, every story exchanged on that old wooden bench. The notebook became my ritual. My offering. My way of keeping Thomas alive, not just in memory, but in motion. Each entry began the same way. Today, someone sat beside me. Sometimes they stayed for 5 minutes. Sometimes an hour. Some left in tears, others in laughter. But all of them left lighter. And I wrote them all down. There was Jeremy, a retired firefighter who lost his best friend in a warehouse blaze. He hadn't cried in 15 years. We both cried that morning. There was Maria, a florist whose hands shook every time she arranged lilies because her daughter used to braid them into her hair before she got sick. There was Kevin, a man in a 3-piece suit who confessed that he was one phone call away from quitting his job and moving to Alaska. He didn't need a push. Just someone to say, "You deserve to be happy." I said it. He smiled. A week later, he came back with a photo of a cabin. His cabin. And I wrote that down too. The notebook filled quickly. Ink smudged from tears. Pages creased from being held too tight. Margins full of scribbled quotes and tiny doodles of pigeons. It wasn't just a journal. It was a map. Of humanity. Of grief and healing and that strange, miraculous thing that happens when two strangers sit side by side and decide to care. I didn't just change. I became something else. A listener. A lighthouse. A benchkeeper. And it never felt like a burden. It felt like becoming exactly who I was always meant to be. One morning, months later, I came to the park and found a small, handwritten note taped to the bench. "I heard what you do here. Thank you." Some of us are still breathing because of it. No name. No contact. Just a little proof that what Thomas started was still rippling. Still saving. Still shining. And I knew right then. This wasn't just my second chance. It was his legacy. Spring came. The trees bloomed. The air smelled like fresh rain and new beginnings. The city, for once, didn't feel like it was pressing in on me, it felt like it was breathing with me. And the bench? The bench became something sacred. People started calling it the story seat. Not officially, there was no plaque, no sign. Just whispers. A quiet, word-of-mouth rumor that if you needed to talk, needed to cry, needed someone to listen, there was a place for that. A person for that. Me. And somehow, without ever planning to, I became part of that park's ecosystem. The hot dog vendor started slipping me extra napkins. Kids began waving at me as they passed, like I was some gentle statue who might come to life. One woman brought me a latte and said, "You're the girl who saved my brother. He said you just sat with him. Thank you." I hadn't known. I didn't need to. Thomas had once told me the best kind of help is the kind where nobody knows they're being rescued, just that they're no longer drowning. That was it. That was the bench. That was us. One day, a city worker came by. Said the bench was up for replacement. Old. Unsafe. Had to go. I panicked. "No," I said. "Please, this bench matters. People come here. They heal here." He raised an eyebrow. "It's just wood, miss." "No," I said again, firmer this time. "It's a lifeline." I didn't yell. Didn't beg. Just looked him in the eye and said, "Let me show you." I pulled out the notebook. Let him read a few entries. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. 2 weeks later, a new plaque appeared on the bench. It read, The listener's bench for all the souls who stayed. In memory of T. I cried when I saw it. Ugly, snotty, shaking tears. Because it wasn't just wood. It was a bridge. Between loneliness and connection. Between goodbye and still here. And it was ours. Forever. I sat on the newly plated bench that morning with a fresh cup of coffee and Thomas's scarf wrapped around my neck. The breeze was soft. The kind that doesn't chill you, just lets you know the world is still moving. I opened the notebook. Wrote at the top of a blank page. Today, no one sat beside me. And that's okay. Not every day was full of revelations and emotional breakdowns. Some days were just quiet. But even those days mattered. Even silence can be sacred. I stayed a while. Let the birds flutter around my feet. Watched a toddler try to chase a squirrel. Smiled as an old couple walked by, arguing playfully about whether it was Tuesday or Wednesday. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed someone to sit beside me. I just welcomed it. There was a strength in that shift. In not depending on pain to define me. In being whole even when I was alone. And then, just as I was packing up to leave, someone sat down. A man. Probably early 50s. Jeans too clean, shirt too wrinkled. He looked like someone who used to care a lot and lately maybe hadn't. He didn't look at me. Just said, "You the one who listens?" I nodded. "If you feel like talking." He was quiet for a moment. Then let out a breath like he'd been holding it for months. "My wife left me last week. 23 years. Just gone." I didn't say, "I'm sorry." Didn't try to fix it. I just looked at him and said, "Do you want to tell me about her?" And he did. He told me about her snort laugh. Her spaghetti that always tasted like too much garlic. Her habit of crying during dog food commercials. I wrote it all down later. Not her name. Not his. Just the weight of the love that once filled a room and the echo it leaves behind. That was entry number 97. By then, the notebook was nearly full. But I knew what I had to do. I bought another. Same brand. Same soft cover. Same clean pages. And on the first page, I wrote, "Today, someone sat beside me." And again, it mattered. It was on entry number 104 when something changed. A young woman, early 20s, headphones around her neck, sleeves pulled over, trembling hands, sat down next to me without saying a word. I didn't look at her. Didn't ask questions. I just waited. After a few minutes, she said I wasn't going to come today. I nodded. "Glad you did," I whispered. She glanced at me, eyes rimmed red. "I heard about this place. That you don't talk much. Just listen." I gave a soft smile. "It's true. I'm not here to fix anything. Just to hold it with you for a while." She let out a shaky laugh. "You sound like my therapist." I shrugged. "Your therapist sounds wise." She didn't speak for a long time. Then she told me about her brother. Overdose. 3 weeks ago. And how she found him. How she hadn't said a word to anyone since the funeral. Not even her parents. Not even herself. "I didn't want to survive it," she said. But then, I saw the plaque. She ran her fingers over the engraved letters. "The listener's bench for all the souls who stayed." "I want to stay," she whispered, voice breaking. "But I don't know how." And something rose in me. Something Thomas had planted that had taken root and grown into a steady, unshakable truth. "You don't have to know how," I said. "You just have to decide. One breath at a time." She wept. I wept with her. We sat in that grief like a prayer. After a while, she said, "Do you write all this down?" I showed her the notebook. She flipped through it slowly, hands gentle like she was holding something sacred. "You ever let other people write in it?" "No one ever asked," I said. She looked at me. And I handed it over. She took the pen like it weighed 100 pounds. And she wrote, "Today, someone held my pain with me. And I didn't break." She gave it back. I didn't say a word. But I felt it. The circle growing wider. The bench, once a quiet monument to one man's kindness, was becoming something bigger. A sanctuary of strangers. A chapel of survival. And Thomas, he was still here. In every word. In every silence. In every person who sat beside me and chose to stay. The seasons turned again. Leaves blushed red and gold. Then gave up and let go. Winter crept back in with its hush and sharp edges. Frosting the edges of the bench like the world was holding its breath. But I stayed. Coat thicker. Scarf tighter. But heart wide open. People still came. Some daily like routine. Others by accident or maybe something bigger. And more often now, they brought others. The woman with the lost brother? She came back. With her roommate. The man whose wife had left. Brought his teenage daughter, silent but curious. Each time, the bench grew warmer, even in the cold. And one gray morning, something happened I never expected. A group of teenagers approached, hoodies, earbuds, that usual armor of not caring plastered across their faces. One of them, a lanky boy with shaggy hair, looked at me and asked, "Are you the bench lady?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what they call me now?" He shrugged. "I mean, yeah, we heard. You just listen to people." I smiled. "Wanna sit?" He hesitated, then dropped down beside me like he'd been carrying 1,000 invisible bricks. The others hovered, watching. "I don't want to talk about my feelings or whatever," he muttered. "You don't have to," I said. We sat for 10 minutes in silence. Then he mumbled, "My dad left, took the dog, said I was too much like him." My throat tightened. "Sounds like you're more than he could handle." His eyes flicked toward me, cautious. Then he nodded. "Can I write something?" I handed him the notebook. He scribbled something quickly, then handed it back. After they left, I read it. I thought nobody saw me, but someone did. Maybe that's enough for now. I stared at the words for a long time. There it was again, that echo of Thomas. That ripple. He tossed one stone, and the waves were still reaching people who didn't even know his name. And then one night, I had a dream. I was back on the bench, but it was warmer, brighter. The sky was the color of honey. Thomas was there, smiling. No oxygen tank, no hospital gown, just his coat, his eyes, his peace. He looked at me and said, "You've done good, kid." And when I woke up, I swear, I could still feel his hand on my shoulder. The first snow came early that year. I showed up to the bench wrapped in 3 layers, coffee in hand, breath puffing clouds into the frozen air. No one was around yet, just me and the silence. And for the first time in a long time, I felt lonely again. Not broken, not empty, just missing him, missing Thomas. I pulled the notebook from my bag, the second one nearly full now, and flipped to a blank page. But instead of writing someone else's story, I wrote to him. "Dear T, the snowing again. You always said the cold was honest. Said it makes people's pain come to the surface quicker. You were right. We've had a lot of souls on the bench lately. Some stay, some run. But I think you'd be proud of how many come back. Sometimes I wonder if you knew all along. If you saw this future in me before I even saw a reason to wake up. Before I could even breathe without drowning. You gave me the gift of presence. A pause. Of purpose. I miss you every single day. But I feel you in every story. In every breath someone finally lets go of. In every silence that doesn't feel empty anymore. The world is still heavy, but I've grown strong enough to carry some of it now. You helped me build that strength. Thank you for the bench, for the birds, for the bravery you never bragged about. Love always, me." I closed the notebook and pressed it to my chest. A breeze swept through the trees, shaking the branches just enough to dust me in snow. I laughed through the tears. "You always had the worst timing," I muttered to the sky. That afternoon, someone left flowers by the bench. White lilies. A simple card tucked into the bouquet read, "To whoever listens here, you're saving lives. One conversation at a time." And I realized, this wasn't just a ripple anymore. It was a movement. People had started bringing their own journals, their own stories, their own willingness to sit with a stranger in the cold and say, "You don't have to do this alone." I was no longer the only one. And Thomas? He was no longer just a man on a bench. He was a legacy, alive in every word, every silence, every soul that chose to stay. The third notebook was already half full. Stories scribbled in all kinds of handwriting. Messy, delicate, furious, afraid, hopeful. Some were just a few words. "I'm still here. It hurts, but I stayed." Today, I told the truth out loud. Others were pages long. Confessions, memories, moments cracked wide open on paper and left to breathe. I started calling it the Bench Archive. Not officially, but in my heart. A living collection of brokenness and bravery. One morning, a woman in a tailored coat and designer heels sat down beside me. She looked like the kind of person who had it all together, hair perfect, phone in hand, eyes sharp. But when she spoke, her voice shook. "I don't know who you are," she said, "but I've walked by this bench every day for a year. Today, I couldn't walk past. I didn't speak. Just offered the space beside me." She stared ahead. "I haven't spoken to anyone since my brother died. Not really. Just small talk. Surface stuff. But I saw the plaque. And something in me said, sit down or you won't survive this week." She looked at me then, eyes full of raw, aching truth. "I don't want to die. I just don't know how to live without him." I placed the notebook in her hands. She stared at the cover like it might burn her. Then she opened it and wrote, "First breath in months. Not because I'm okay. Because someone let me be not okay." When she handed it back, her fingers touched mine. "Thank you," she whispered. And she walked away. But she wasn't the same as when she arrived. She was staying. That night, I took all 3 notebooks and placed them on my shelf at home, beside Margaret's photo, beside Thomas's scarf, beside a tiny bronze pigeon figurine someone once left on the bench with a note. For the man who listened. For the girl who stayed. And then I started a 4th notebook. First page, fresh ink. Today, someone sat beside me. And once again. It mattered. That's the thing about pain. It isolates. But presence? Presence connects. And a park bench, old, worn, simple, became a bridge between silence and survival. Thomas didn't save the world. He just saved mine. And now? I'm saving others. One conversation at a time. Because sometimes all it takes is a stranger, a story. And the courage to stay.